In a partially destroyed apartment building in post-apocalyptic France, the landlord, Butcher Clapet, rents out apartments and runs a small shop where he sells meat delicacies. One day, one of his tenants puts on a protective suit made of bags, sneaks downstairs, and hides in a trash bin. He watches as the garbage men collect other bins, but his is carried to Clapet, who opens the lid. Seeing the terrified man, Clapet smiles and then lowers a butcher's cleaver onto his head. The next day, the building's tenants come to the shop to buy fresh meat. They pay with pouches of corn, where every kernel is worth its weight in gold. Residents Kubi and Roger complain about the rising prices, but still purchase the delicacy. As they leave the shop, a taxi pulls up to the building, and a short man unloads his belongings. The taxi driver asks to be paid with his shoes, so the young man walks to Clapet in just his socks. He came in response to an apartment rental ad, and Clapet realizes this is a new victim. The young man isn't tall, nor does he weigh much, but Clapet is still willing to rent him the apartment, provided he does odd jobs around the building, doing small repairs in other tenants' rooms. The man agrees to these terms, and Clapet leads him to the second floor. Louison unpacks his things, and it becomes clear that he works in the circus. Meanwhile, Kubi and Roger are working in their workshop, discussing a neighbor and hoping that this time things will work out for her. Louison, meanwhile, pulls out a basin and starts blowing soap bubbles on the stairs, immediately attracting the attention of two neighbor boys and Clapet's daughter, Julie. The next morning, the tenants go about their daily tasks. Louison paints the ceiling, Julie plays the cello, Marcel Tapioca's wife beats a carpet while Marcel inflates his bicycle tire, and her mother knits in front of the TV. Meanwhile, Clapet and his lover, Mademoiselle Plus, are engaged in love games, the creaking of the bed's springs setting the pace for the entire building's residents. As the rhythm speeds up, everyone works faster until the climax causes Louison to fall from his ladder. Later, he fixes the shop sign as postman Michel arrives, who considers himself Julie's fiancé, much to Clapet's approval. Louison warns the postman about the slippery stairs, but Michel rudely cuts him off, only to pay the price by falling down the steps. Along the way, he drops a parcel meant for Julie, which the neighbors immediately start fighting over. The package ends up in Louison's hands. Michel disperses the crowd by brandishing a gun just as Julie arrives and sees him taking the package from Louison. He introduces himself as her fiancé, but she corrects him. He's just a friend. He informs her that he'll wait for her consent and leaves. Julie apologizes to Louison and invites him for tea with the delivered sweets. Meanwhile, Michel bids farewell to Clapet, who reveals that his new tenant is an unemployed circus clown. Life in the building goes on. Tapioca's mother-in-law knits furiously while he argues with his wife. Their children head to the basement window where a man lives, raising frogs and snails, which he eats. The boys try to steal a few frogs, but the old man chases them away and snacks on snails himself. Julie is preparing for Louison's visit. Deciding that her glasses ruin her appearance, she removes them, despite being nearly blind without them. She counts the steps to the table and rehearses her movements several times until the doorbell rings. However, Louison throws off her calculations by sitting in a different chair. He skillfully dodges the hot kettle, helping Julie pour the tea. He then joins in the conversation about Michel, not understanding why Julie dislikes him. At the same time, Kube meets their neighbor, Aurora, who confesses that she hears a voice calling her to death. Julie suggests that Louison move out of the building, citing its age, thin walls, leaky roof, and overall inconvenience. But the young man likes it here. Hearing this, Julie spills tea beside the cups, and the record player starts skipping. The couple rushes to fix it, knocking over a vase in the process, and end up very close to each other. Julie puts on her glasses and confesses that she plays the cello. Louison immediately brings out a saw and tells her about his partner, who disappeared after a performance. Later, it was discovered that he was eaten. Julie is ready to confess everything to Louison, but he starts playing the saw, and she joins in on her cello. Their music echoes throughout the building as Clapet discusses the new worker with Mademoiselle Plus. She admits that she likes the young man, which gives the butcher some bad ideas. The duet ends, and Julie finally confesses to Louison that his friend was eaten in this house. However, it turns out the clown has fallen asleep and didn't hear her. Julie realizes she gave him sleeping pills instead of sugar. She takes him to his room, puts him to bed, and sees a poster, learning that the devoured friend was a monkey. Julie locks the clown's door and goes to her room, but all night she dreams of the horrific attack on the monkey. She then hears her father's voice as he plots to kill Louison and sees the neighbors preparing to butcher and eat him. Julie screams and wakes up. The next day, Mademoiselle Plus calls Louison to fix a bed that squeaks loudly. He asks her to bounce on the mattress while he crawls underneath, but the squeak isn't audible that way. Plusa suggests bouncing together, so they both sit on the bed, rocking it, much to the embarrassment of the entire building, until Louisan finds the rings that need replacing. Meanwhile, Aurora prepares to meet her end, sitting in a bathtub filled with water. A lamp stands nearby on a piece of cloth, which is threaded into a sewing machine whose cord is attached to the doorbell. Kube finds the woman's note inviting him over and rings the doorbell. The machine starts working, pulling the cloth, and the lamp falls into the water. But just then, Louisan accidentally hits the socket, cutting off electricity to the entire building. Aurora survives. Plusa thanks Louisan for fixing the bed, while the neighbor boys pull down her underwear from the balcony where it gets stuck on a lamp. To retrieve it, Louisan skillfully uses a boomerang. At the same time, Clapet tells Marcel Tapioca that he is behind on rent and must give up his mother-in-law's payment. In the evening, Julie begs her father to let Louisan go, knowing that Clapet kills tenants for meat. She returns his gift, for which he slaps her, outraged by her ingratitude. He's tired of her unlucky suitors, though a decent man is courting her, so he will definitely kill the clown. Distraught, Julie goes back to her apartment, opens the fridge, and sees a newspaper article about the troglodytes, a group of vegetarian rebels living underground. Julie heads into the sewers to contact the fearsome troglodytes, whom she plans to convince to save Louisan. Meanwhile, Tapioca decides to give his mother-in-law to Clapet. He kicks her ball of yarn out the door and signals the landlord. The old woman steps into the hallway and runs into Clapet, but frightened by a spider, she passes away, leaving Clapet screaming in frustration. In the meantime, the troglodytes surround Julie. It turns out Louisan is their enemy because he fixed the pipes in the building, cutting off their water supply. Now they are ready to destroy him. Julie offers them corn and explains that their enemy works for her father. She promises to lead them to him, giving them a false apartment number. When Julie returns home, a tenant complains about nighttime screams. She rushes to Louisan's apartment and sees an axe protruding from his head, but it turns out to be a rehearsal for a new trick. At the same time, Clapet gives part of Tapioca's grandmother to his family, assuring them that she didn't suffer. Later, Clapet overhears a conversation between his daughter and Louisan, in which the clown speaks of forgiveness, even for those who ate his monkey. Clapet realizes that the relationship between the young people has become a problem for him. Meanwhile, the troglodytes crawl through the sewer pipes to enter the building and catch Louisan. The old man who raises frogs and snails opens all the pipes to flood the basement, creating suitable conditions for his pets. Aurora prepares a new attempt on her life. This time, she ties a rope to the sewing machine and lies underneath it, waiting for the water to release a saucer holding a candle, which will burn through the rope. But all the water flows into the basement, stopping the process. Furious, Aurora throws the sewing machine out the window, just as Michelle delivers a TV program schedule to Clapet, which indicates the time of Louisan's performance. The troglodytes sneak into the building and find a stash of corn, but continue their mission to capture Louisan. At the same time, Clapet hands the newspaper to Plusa, who rushes to Louisan to show him the announcement about the broadcast. Julie hears music coming from his room and sees the couple dancing, celebrating the news. She leaves and uses the radio to summon the troglodytes, urging them to take the clown away, as everyone is busy watching TV. Then she returns to Louisan to watch the broadcast together. Meanwhile, Aurora ties a rope to the door, attaching the other end to the trigger of a gun aimed at her head. She also turns on the gas stove and prepares to take a handful of pills. While Julie and Louisan watch TV, Clapet climbs to the roof and shakes the antenna, forcing Louisan to go up and fix it. Aurora lights the fuse on a bottle of explosives and puts the noose around her neck. On the roof, Clapet attacks Louisan with a cleaver, and Julie sees it, trying to warn the young man. At that moment, Plus enters Louisan's room. A fight breaks out on the roof, with Louisan defending himself using the antenna, causing the TV signal to flicker on and off. Meanwhile, Aurora's husband pulls on the door handle, causing the gun to fire, snapping the noose. The woman falls, scattering her pills. The water glass breaks, extinguishing the fuse, and Aurora's head closes the gas valve, making her spit out the pills. At the same time, the troglodytes break into Louisan's room and mistakenly capture Mademoiselle Plus. Aurora's husband turns on the light, triggering an explosion from the accumulated gas. Just as Clapet is about to kill the clown, his attempt is thwarted by the unexpected explosion. The butcher falls from the roof but manages to grab a rope and hang on. Julie runs to the transmitter to cancel the operation, but she is caught by Michelle, who attacks her. Louisan's boomerang cuts the cord of the chandelier, which knocks out the postman. The couple runs to Louisan's room while the other tenants flee from the fire. Meanwhile, the troglodytes realize their mistake and decide to return, leaving the woman in the basement. Clapet, along with several tenants, tries to break into Louison's room, so Louison and Julie hide in the bathroom and flood it to the ceiling. When Clapet opens the door, the water washes away the attackers. The old building starts to collapse as Plus climbs out of the sewer, finds Louison's boomerang knife, and gives it to Clapet. The troglodytes appear and save Julie, pulling her through a hole in the ceiling just as Clapet throws the boomerang at Louison, but it returns and kills the butcher. Sometime later, the butcher's shop is closed, and Louison and Julie play together on the roof of the now peaceful apartment building. Despite its grim plot, the film turned out light, witty, and not scary at all. Even the color palette is unusually warm for the horror genre, and the word strange is always applied to Genet's work.